All right, everyone. Well, welcome to the lecture on hormones for IPAK-EDU Bio-B. We're really going to be talking about the endocrine system. The endocrine system is a collection of glands that produce and secrete chemical messages around our bodies, the way organs talk to each other, and there's the way that organs talk to glands talk to tissues, and it's the way the central nervous system sends long distance communications from organ to organ in a way that's timed, that is not as fast as the central nervous system. If you have any questions, of course, put them in the chat. We'll deal with them at the end. But hormones travel from these endocrine organs to the target via the blood. They target the cells that have receptors on them. So if you have like the pineal gland puts out a hormone, it's really only going to impact other tissues and organs that have the receptors for that particular hormone. Now, this is not going to be a total inventory of all the hormones in the human body. You can look that up on Wikipedia if you care to. But what we are going to do is we're going to identify some, well-known endocrine glands in the body. We're going to talk about some of the better understood hormones, more generally understood hormones that are produced by some of the glands. We're going to understand the target tissue of some of the glands and understand some of the functions of some of the hormones. We're also going to give you an example of a negative feedback system. So if you look at the male and female cartoon representations here, you can see the distribution of the most commonly recognized parts of the endocrine system. Glands, by definition, secrete hormones. Not all of the tissue in each gland secretes hormones. Some of the tissues are structural. Some of the tissue, so that the gland has the right shape and the right space in the body. Some of them are have receptors on their surface. So the glands tend to not be uniform tissues. They tend to be heterogeneous. An example of this would be the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland has an anterior lobe and a neuronal posterior lobe. The pituitary gland hangs in the brain, underneath the brain, in a location. Let's see, I think I have a picture of the location here. Yeah, so here's the pituitary gland where it's hanging down like a grape on a stalk. And the pituitary gland produces a lot of hormones. It's composed of two lobes. The anterior, it secretes the hormones involved in the body's growth and development. The posterior, which secretes hormones that increase reabsorption of water in the kidneys. That's right there. But the anterior pituitary, the six major ones that it produces are the thyroid stimulating hormone, the follicle stimulating hormone. There's a luteinizing hormone that tells the eggs when to take off, when to proceed to maturation. The adrenocorticotropic hormone, we're going to talk about that, growth hormone, and prolactin. So just this one little gland does a lot. Okay. And like I said, if we stopped for every tissue in the endocrine system, we would end up, with a massive inventory of all those different hormones. But what I want to do is kind of take you through this as a process, right? So like the central nervous system, hormones are a way that the body communicates with itself and sends signals. They're integrated. They're not separate. Especially the parasympathetic part of the nervous system. The way that our body moves things around that we don't have control over. For instance, the digestion, the kinds of things like that we don't really have mental control over, but the hormones have control over the timing. So, we interface with the world around us with inputs from our eyes, ears, nose, skin, and so on. So we have those signals coming into our body. Those signals absolutely affect our hormonal production. All right. there's a very strong relationship between our experiences, what we're experiencing, and what our hormonal glands or glandular tissues do. Um, the effect of the hormones from any of the glandular tissues are to either increase cellular activity at a distance or decrease cellular activity at a distance. When I say at a distance, we're really, signaling from tissue to tissue, as I said. And some of the signals say to other tissues, you should produce other hormones, or you should stop producing other hormones. Some of the signals can affect the release of cytokines. Um, and some of the signals are strong gene regulators. We're going to talk about vitamin D at the end. So most of the hormones are amino acid based or water soluble, but some are steroids and they're synthesized from cholesterol. That means they're lipid soluble. The ones that are amino acid based and water soluble, they can't get through the cell membrane. So they have to be carried through the channel proteins. But the ones that are made from cholesterol, there's lipid soluble, they glide right through the cell membrane. So those are going to be the gonadal and adrenocortical hormones. Uh, some people include the prostaglandins. They're lipid based as hormones, and I would tend to do that because they definitely have the similar effect of hormones, the eicosanoids and prostaglandin. So if we look at this from the organ system, first organ systems we want to think about are the gonads, the pancreas, and the placenta, and what kinds of hormones they produce. So um, the gonads, pancreas, and the placenta, they tend to produce the water soluble ones, whereas the hypothalamus tends to produce um, the steroidal type. Okay, so I think that that's right. I don't know why. I thought I updated these cells, but we'll see if that holds true. I may have that backwards, but uh, the reality is that we have, very specific signals from hormone producing glands, the specific actions on specific cells. And that can't be emphasized enough. There's not just kind of a cascade, although I use the word cascade, that's coming later, but there isn't some kind of like general diffusion of a hormone signal throughout the body that typically affects all of your cells. However, there are some examples like that. So the typical hormone will target specific cells. And an example of this would be the pituitary producing the follicle stimulating hormone. The follicle stimulating hormone regulates growth in growing humans and children and triggers sexual maturity as they go through puberty. The follicle stimulating hormone specifics targets specific cells in the ovaries and the testes. And so without the FSH, you're not going to go through proper sexual maturity in a manner in which you can reproduce. Um, coming down, looking at the endocrine system gives you great appreciation for the interconnectedness of the human body. So the hypothalamus maintains the body's homeostasis, regulates body temperature, heart rate, and blood pressure. This is one, the signals from the hypothalamus can be either site directed, like there's a specific signal to the pituitary we're going to talk about, or they could also just be general around the entire body. There's signals from the hypothalamus that causes all of your cells to be able to produce and react, consume energy and burn up ATP faster, increase metabolism, specifically when it comes to things like the fight or flight syndrome. And we're going to go through that in detail. The pineal gland is responsible for the production of melatonin. That is one of the glands and one of the compounds, of course, that's plays a major role in our sleep-wake cycle. So, if the pituitary produces the FSH, let's look at what the thyroid did. The thyroid produces thyroxine, which stimulates metabolism, and thyroxine receptors are found throughout most of the body. And this is another one that's important because it's more widespread. Um, so it's butterfly shaped and it's found, around your esophagus. It produces calcitonin. Calcitonin actually regulates the action of cells that are called osteoclasts, which are the things that break down your bone. You have osteoclast and osteoblast. It produces T3. I'm going to chicken out triodoxythyronine, thyronine, and thyroxine T4. These help maintain the body's energy and metabolism, and like I said, they affect the gland secretions from the thyroid affect tissues all around the body. The parathyroid secretes hormones that are necessary for calcium absorption. So that's also interestingly related to bone production, obviously. Um, but the targets and functions of the thyroid include the metabolic functions, the regulate growth, the development of the nervous system, as well as essential functioning of the nervous system. And you probably know somebody that's got thyroid dysfunction, and they tend to be a wreck. They tend to not be able to chill out, or they tend to be highly excitable or anxious. No judgment there at all. But the TH amplifies the effects of the parasympathetic nervous system. And so, I'm sorry, the sympathetic nervous system. So what that means is, if you have signals that are out of the nervous system, that are out of your control, then out of your mental control, so far as we know, it may be difficult for you to control it. If you have a hyperthyroid or hypothyroid, it's difficult to regulate these very basic functions: body energy and metabolism. All right. So if we look at the pancreas, of course, produces insulin and glucagon. It aids in the digestion of proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. The insulin helps regulate the level of glucose in the blood, as well as glucagon. And we're going to go through that in more detail. The adrenal glands are located on top of the kidney, and those produce hormones that allow the body to react to stress, such as adrenaline and cortisol. And we're going to go into some detail there. So with the pancreas, here's what happens. If you eat sugar, you have to regulate it. If you just absorb the sugar into your blood, the sugar is going to run rampant throughout your body, however much you eat. If you eat a dessert, or if you eat a piece of candy, or eat some pie or whatever, then all of your cells are going to have access to excess sugar. And so the pancreas produces insulin and glucagon to keep this in balance. It's the beta cells in the pancreas that produce the insulin, and they secrete the insulin based on the presence of blood sugar. And the alpha cells, they produce glucagon to downregulate the effects of insulin. So they have opposite effects. So, excuse me, insulin increases the rate at which cells actually can store sugar. So it's not insulin binding to sugar or anything like that. It actually tells the cells, you should store the sugar that you see as glycogen and eventually as fat. This is a 3D model of porcine insulin, which is used by diabetics routinely to help regulate. It's highly conserved sugar metabolism. It hasn't evolved much at all since humans diverged from the artiodactyl human ancestor. I'm not saying that humans had an artiodactyl ancestor. I'm saying the primate artiodactyl common ancestor, the last common ancestor. Glucagon decreases the storage in the sugar in cells, so it causes the cells to release sugar, and it increases it back into the blood. And so one might think, well, why don't we just inject glucagon? If you want to lose weight, you'll get rid of the sugar. It won't be stored as fat. The problem is then your blood sugar is going to rise up, and if your blood sugar rises up because of that, you're just going to produce more insulin. So that's a negative feedback system. You can't outsmart this, and it's very easy to get it wrong. So you don't want to go around injecting glucagon for the purpose of losing weight. I'm not saying that if you injected glucagon and then ran a marathon, that you wouldn't have more energy in your blood in places where you want it, because it would pull sugar from all pores of your body. But if you're going to do that, just eat a candy bar and, that kind of thing. So the reproductive gonads, the ovary, and the testes, the ovary secretes estrogen and progesterone. They are really important for the health of the female reproductive system. And if there's anything complicated about hormone systems, it's complicated in the female reproductive cycle. The testes, not so complicated. You secretes testosterone. It's vital for physical development, bone density, and libido in males. Females also have testosterone. So I mentioned a cascade earlier. I want to talk about this hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. You've got to get this right as a human being. If you don't get your HPA axis right, then you're going to have serious problems that accumulate over time. Uh, the HPA axis controls digestion, sexuality, immune response, and how you handle stress. I want to say it contributes to the regulation, not directly controls it. But the immune response and how you handle stress is very, very important. If you don't have a good HPA adrenal axis with proper feedback, you can get into serious trouble. So the hypothalamus is the part of the brain. It is the overseer of this endocrine to sympathetic nervous system coordinator. This particular HPA axis interacts with and is a companion to the sympathetic nervous system. The hypothalamus produces corticotropin releasing hormone, which is picked up by cells on the interior, just a few centimeters away by the pituitary gland. So the hypothalamus secretes CRH, and then there's some cells at the front of the pituitary gland that pick up the CRH. The hypothalamus doing that, then the pituitary causes the pituitary to create adrenocorticotropic hormone. And that hormone, the ACTH, actually travels down to the adrenal cortices on the adrenal glands. The adrenal cortices are specialized cells that pick up the ACTH. The adrenal cortex then creates glucocorticoids and mineralocorticoid hormones. Now, there's a reason why it's called a glucocorticoid. It's related to sugar metabolism. We think about lipid metabolism, we think about sugar, we think about insulin. This particular pathway, the HPA axis, I think is underappreciated in its role of having a balanced approach towards handling stress, obviously with the adrenal glands being involved, and handling the deposition of the conversion of sugar into fat. You probably all heard that the cortisol contributes to the deposition of fat, and that stress increases cortisol. This is the pathway. So, starting again with the hypothalamus secreting the CRH, the pituitary gland picks that up. The pituitary gland then pushes out the ACTH. The ACTH then goes to the adrenal glands, and the adrenal glands produce the glucocorticoid and the mineralocorticoid hormones. These are the hormones that help us deal with stress. They also regulate blood sugar and they regulate blood pressure. If you get really high amounts of glucocorticoid and mineralocorticoids, like wake up and your house is on fire, or if you walk down the street and you see somebody attack someone, you're gonna go into fight or flight. You're instantly going to have this purge from your adrenal glands of this push out of glucocorticoids and mineralocorticoids, and your capillaries and your veins and arteries are all going to expand. They're going to become more flexible. They're going to expand, so you have less restricted blood flow. Your heartbeat's going to increase, and there's nothing you can do to fight this. Your heartbeat's going to increase, your pupils will dilate, and your mind's going to have to start thinking, what's wrong? And what am I going to do about this? Now, think about that. You walk down the street or whatever, you're in a situation that's really stressful and it invokes this fight or flight. That is all from what you witness with your eyes, ears, or something somebody tells you, or some situation that you realize is happening. So it's through the brain. The brain is processing this information, and then the hypothalamus turns this into a chemical signal. It's not an electrical chemical signal that goes through the central nervous system. It's just a flush. Here you go. You're in trouble. Go to it. Um, now, there are other cells in the hypothalamus then that shut down the corticotropin releasing hormone once you get this fight or flight. So you'll feel exhausted afterwards. You'll feel like just don't want to do anything, and that's because the hypothalamus is shutting down the corticotropin releasing hormone, and your adrenal glands are not getting signal that there's an issue once the problem is dealt with or resolved. So obviously this is important because we live in very stressful times. And in stressful times, if people get chronically stressed out, they're not going to regulate their blood sugar properly. They're going to have problems with their blood pressure. They're constantly going to be in stress, fight or flight. Their adrenal glands are going to be going crazy. The adrenal cortex in particular are going to be going crazy constantly. And it's really super important that we act in ways and carry ourselves in ways around people that won't stress them out. It's unkind. It's like an assault on their hypothalamus. So maybe I'll make a T-shirt that says, dude, lay off my hypothalamus. That'd be good. Um, so I just want to go into some things that can go wrong in general with hormones. If you see hyperinsulinemia or hypoinsulinemia, the hyper or hypo, of course, means hyper means too much and hypo means too little. Signs of hormonal imbalance in women in particular, weight gain, trouble losing weight. You can have constant fatigue, low libido, irregular cycles, infertility can occur, hot flashes and night sweats, mood swings, insomnia, hormonal acne, kind of on the chin where you're going to pick out all your whiskers, excess hair growth. The hormonal acne won't go away until you fix, the hormonal imbalance. And if you have hair loss or you're taking a shower and your hair is falling out, that's probably a hormone. So these things are addressable through various means, including diet. And so I would definitely talk with an endocrinologist if you're having problems with hormone balance. The kind of the last thing I want to leave you with, and we can talk about it, is vitamin D. It's actually, I call it a mega hormone precursor. It's synthesized into a steroid hormone. There's a video of a scientist discussing this on YouTube. It's a great, great presentation. She talks about the genes, genetic environment and interactions. 4.6%, she says, of the human genome is regulated by vitamin D. I think she has her numbers on vitamin D dosing wrong. I saw her on Joe Rogan talking about the dosage. I'm not going to talk about dosage here because I don't want to give away I don't want to give any advice, but I will refer you to a friend of mine, Keith Baggerly, MD, Anderson Cancer Center. And here at the Vitamin D Wiki, you can find his um, reveal that the FDA made a terrible mistake in the way that they analyzed the data on the safe level of dosing in vitamin D. Everybody understands that people around the country are underdosed in vitamin D. They don't have enough vitamin D. What they don't understand is that the FDA made a big mistake. So there's an article there for you to read, and also Keith Baggerly's presentation, where he'll walk you through exactly what they did wrong and why we're all underdosing. And we've learned, of course, with SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19 that vitamin D is among some of the most important vitamins that we should have in proper balance. So that's my overview. I'll just stop this um, and stop recording. Where did that go? There it is. Okay.